so with that being said, the last session, July the 5th, between now and July the 5th, take some time to think about everything that we studied and write down some questions or something like that you may have. And we'll spend our last class together doing like a Q&A session. So that way we can just sort of review everything and tie everything up and, be ready to go on this study. So be thinking about some questions between now and July 5th that you might want to ask about the study as a whole, or even, some individual topics that we covered. Today we're going to cover the topic of singing as a spiritual discipline, singing. And so we're going to be in the Psalms a lot today. The first verse that I want to read from the Psalms will be Psalm 104, verse 33. Psalm 104, verse 33. And Psalm 104, verse 33 says, I will sing to the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have my being. And so what made me think of this verse is there's a song that I learned a couple years ago, and maybe if you've ever been to CYC or any of those other big events, they may be singing it some now too. The song's called How Can I Keep From Singing? And it's a wonderful song, and it just, as I was studying for our singing class today, that song came to my mind, and then this verse sort of best encompasses that idea, because every waking minute of our life, it should be with singing. The psalmist says, "I will sing to the Lord as long as I live," and so that'll be what kicks off our study this morning. And so when we think about singing, this is something that this is probably the easiest thing for us to think about, because it covers at least a third of our time together on Sundays. A big, I'd say over half of the worship service is involved with singing. We have songs before the giving. We have songs before the Lord's Supper. We have an invitation song. We have a closing song. We have so many songs that are placed at so many different places in our worship time together, that singing is easy to think of. And so we do this pretty regularly as a group. But part of why this is a spiritual discipline is that it's encouraged to do it outside of these four walls. And we're going to look at some of that today, to sort of tie that thought together. There was a time a few years back, and I don't remember all of the principles from the class, but I went through a class that dealt with training worship leaders. And when you think about training worship leaders, you primarily think about leading singing. But there's one principle that the class was sort of founded on, and I think that's really the direction that this class needs to go. The idea is that it's the singing, the praying, any aspect of worship should be a viewed as holistic. And what I mean by that is we are 100% engaged, heart, soul, and mind fully engaged. Singing is where that best comes out. But, you think about in prayer, let's be fully engaged if someone is leading our minds in prayer. Paying attention to the words that they pray, paying attention to the things that are being prayed for. Holistically being involved in prayer. The Lord's Supper is another one of the easy ones, because the Bible gives so much to think about in regards to the Lord's Supper. And of course, the whole foundation of the Lord's Supper is that you should be, 100% involved in that. It's a memorial of the body and the blood of Christ. It should be holistic. And so for us to understand singing as a spiritual discipline, we're going to approach it from that aspect. And so there are three different sections in the notes in regards to the purpose of singing, and they're best summarized as an upward, an outward, and an inward. Upward, outward, inward are the three aspects of holistic singing. Upward is praising to the Lord. You're singing to God first. And so, sometimes you say, I might hear somebody say, well, I can't sing because I can't carry a tune in a bucket. And it's like, well, you're not trying to please. It's not a performance. That's a reoccurring theme in this study. It's not a performance. But you're singing to God first. And to God, everybody's voice sounds beautiful. So don't let, the people around you stop you from being fully engaged in your singing. The next thing is outward, where we're actually singing to one another. Singing is a method of teaching. The songs that we sing, they can teach the gospel. They can teach other Christian living principles. And so singing is outward. We sing and teach each other. And then finally, the inward is for our own personal fulfillment and enrichment. We should get something out of singing as well. Not just for worship, but just, I don't know about you, but after a good singing night, my voice may be tired, but I'm recharged. I get a lot of joy in being together, and I get a lot of joy from singing. And so those are the three areas that we're going to look at in more detail as far as the purpose of singing, the upward, outward, and the inward. And so we're going to begin with the upward. And again, these principles are pretty basic. I think most of us understand singing pretty easily. But we'll go through these and we'll look at these in detail. And so the first thing, of course, is praise to the Lord, and the upward focus of our singing. And this is the most common reason that we sing, and it's the number one reason that we sing. And we get this idea, you think about one of the things that we're supposed to sing, the word hymn. The word hymn comes from the Greek word hymnos. It means a song in praise of. In this case, a song in praise to God. And so we've got several verses to read, and we'll ask for readers in that. Somebody read Psalm 30, verse 4. Psalm 30, verse 4.
Sing to the Lord, all you godly ones, praise his holy name.
Thank you. So again, that command, sing praise to the Lord, and that's going to be the reoccurring phrase that we see in these passages. Somebody read Psalm 47, verses 6 and 7. Psalm 47, verses 6 and 7.
Sing praises to God, sing praises to our King, sing praises. For God is the King of all the earth, sing ye praises with understanding.
Thank you, Billy. And so we have that over and over again, sing praises. Somebody read Psalm 96. No, wait, I'm sorry, Psalm 95. Psalm 95, verse 1. Psalm 95, verse 1.
Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation.
Thank you, Rick. Someone else read Psalm 96, verses 1 and 2. Thank you, Miss Brenda. And so I think it's pretty easily we get the idea. A lot of these psalms that deal with singing, the direction of the singing is to the Lord. And so I think that's, pretty easy to understand, and something that we don't have to belabor to make the point. There are some passages where we want to see this played out in an example. These psalms kind of imply that the psalmist is singing, but there are some other examples that we could consider. Someone read Psalm 28, verses 6 and 7. Psalm 28, verses 6 and 7. And so this is an example of David singing praises to God in reaction to God's blessings, of hearing his prayers and being his strength and shield. And so David responds to the Lord in song. Somebody read James chapter 5, verse 13. James chapter 5, verse 13. Thank you for that. And so again, here we see that this is, is just a part of Christian walk. This is natural for Christians to be singing. And then even in times of persecution, we see the importance of singing. Somebody read Acts chapter 16 and verse number 25. Acts 16:25. Thank you for that. And so, again, even in the midst of persecution, and hopefully what you got from that is that in every aspect in our life, we can rise to the occasion, if you will, with singing. And of course, singing to the Lord is the direction that we sing in those moments. Any comments or questions about that? I know it's pretty easy, but still.
First of all, it's a command. Second of all, the command is all of it's going towards God. We should feel appreciation for that and emotional about it.
Yeah.
We shouldn't go through emotions just like all the other disciplines of the church.
And that's something that, sometimes we're afraid to talk about. If you're not emotionally involved in worship, not just singing, but in all aspects of worship, I'd be hard pressed to say that if you're really worshiping or not. And that's why, I brought up the whole idea of being holistically involved, heart, soul, mind, and strength involved in worship. So that's a good point there. Anything else before we move on?
I wonder if the Psalms had notes just like our music today, or I was wondering if they carry tunes, know it all. I know they don't rhyme.
I don't know, but the book of Psalms, they used it for two purposes. You can pray the Psalms. A lot of those are prayers. And then, of course, obviously they used it for singing. I would think that they had some way of carrying a tune, just because some of the Psalms mention instruments. So I would think that they had something in place. I don't know what, but, there are a lot of our songs even today that take just a couple verses from the Psalms, and, that's the Psalm. For example, Psalm 3 is about how the Lord is a shield around his people. And there's a song that we have sung at other places called A Shield About Me. And it's literally Psalm 3. So if you know Psalm 3, you can sing that song. And there are some other psalms that are, pretty close to that. So I would think they had some way of keeping that somewhat organized. All right, so the next aspect of our singing would be the outward aspect, to teach and admonish one another. And so the two verses associated with this point, we know them very well. In fact, they're the most common verses that we use for singing in the New Testament. Somebody read Ephesians 5:19, and then someone else read Colossians 3:16. Ephesians 5:19 and then Colossians 3:16.
Speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord.
Thank you for that. Dusty, someone else read Colossians 3:16.
Let the message about Christ and all its riches fill your lives. Teach and counsel each other with all the wisdom he gives. Sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to God with thankful hearts.
Thank you for that, Miss Linda. And so again, those are the two verses that we use most commonly for New Testament singing. But Paul mentions the direction. Now, we're still singing to the Lord primarily, but you add maybe another layer to that. It's like, okay, we're singing to one another. A lot of the songs that we sing, they teach Christian principles. They teach the gospel. And you know, in some cases, if you did it right, even with today's modern songs, if you did it right, you could put together an entire sermon just from songs. There was a preacher that I used to know. He has since passed, and at least once a month on a Sunday night, he was a really good song leader and he was a really good preacher, and so he would combine the two. He would begin by singing a song, and then he would make his point based on why we sung the song. And you know, you do that for a few times, and you know, you've got a whole sermon just from songs. So there are some teaching aspects from the idea of singing. There's not a lot of meat there. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory and pretty straightforward. But any comments on that? All right. And then the last one, as far as the purpose of singing, we're going to talk about the inward. So, and again, don't separate these three ideas. Put them all together. Make them like layers. Upward, outward, and inward. The three layers of singing, if you will. And so, we're going to look at the inward, which is our personal benefit. And so someone read Psalm 71, verse 23. Psalm 71, verse 23.
My lips shall greatly rejoice when I sing unto thee, and my soul doeth which thou hast ordained.
Thank you for that, Billy. And so he says that his lips greatly rejoice and that his soul is rejoicing in the idea of singing. And so we see David's personal benefit from that. David also found singing to be pleasant and beautiful. Somebody read Psalm 147, verse 1. Psalm 147, verse 1.
Praise ye the Lord, for it is good to sing praises unto our God, for it is best praise.
Thank you for that, Miss Brenda. And so, again, David says that it is pleasant and beautiful to sing praises. And you know, when we have a full house here at Dover, it's great singing. I love sitting up here up front because I just love listening to how well the singing is. And then you go to other congregational singings that where you've got several congregations gathered together to sing. It's beautiful. You know, it makes you think of that song, "How Beautiful Heaven Must Be." To hear Christians from all the ages singing praises, that's going to be a beautiful sound. and it's one that I don't think we can fully comprehend. But it's definitely a beautiful thing to be involved in singing. And so turn back over to, we won't read it again, but turn back over to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5 real quick. And I want to point this out as, again, one of the personal benefits of singing. Ephesians chapter 5, and we'll pull verse 18 into it. So I'll read verses 18 and 19, and then we'll make the point. So Ephesians chapter 5, beginning at verse 18, it says, "And do not be drunk with wine, in which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord." And so there is the benefit here is, not to be filled with the worldly spirit. That can be, we use that a lot for alcohol, but I think it can be in anything. Don't be filled with, the spirit of the world, but rather be filled with the Spirit of God. And you're singing, singing not just to yourself, but also to others. And I think is what Paul's really saying in Ephesians 5, 18 and 19. And so, Spirit-filled singing is the term that the notes use. And again, it's the idea just you're fully engaged in the act of singing. And again, not limited to singing, but worship in general, I would think. Yeah. There's a verse in the Minor Prophets, and I don't have it in my notes, but there's a verse in the Minor Prophets that, and I think you have to read it from the New American Standard Translation to get the picture of it. But it says, like when we're singing together in worship, it paints the picture as that God is singing with us. And just take a minute to think about that. It's like God is as if He's here singing with us. The songs that we sing, and so it just adds a whole nother level, to our worship and the idea of singing. Any other comments before we move on to the practice of singing? All right, so the practice of singing. And again, this is going to be pretty straightforward, pretty cut and dry. And the notes really paint that picture of the holistic view in your singing. And so the first thing that we would do in the practice of singing is engage the mind. So since we know that singing is teaching and admonishing one another, that assumes that we understand what we sing. If you just sing words because you put them up on the screen, it's like the song leader says, we're singing this song. If that is your mentality, that's not necessarily a bad mentality, but it's like if you're trying to teach and admonish one another, you need to understand what you're singing. And so, it helps, like when we have services where we might learn another song or take some time and maybe preach a lesson around a song. Understanding what you sing is important. Somebody read 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 15. Thank you for that, Billy. And so, again, it's the idea of understanding, being engaged. And so, when you think about this, now it's okay, like if you're sitting in the pew, it's okay to enjoy the singing. Like I said, I purposefully sit up front so that way I can hear how beautiful it is. But let your mind focus on the purpose of singing primarily, rather than, okay, I'm sitting here or doing whatever just for the enjoyment of it. It's one thing to be engaged in the purpose of singing and just, you coincidentally enjoy it too. But it's another thing if you're sitting somewhere, if you're attending somewhere, just because of the enjoyment that you would get out of the singing. And so it's not wrong to enjoy it, but it's, if that's your primary purpose, then that becomes the problem. The next thing that we are to engage is we engage the heart. We engage the heart as we sing. Colossians 3:16, it says, with grace in your hearts. And so when we sing with grace in our hearts. And so our hearts are engaged. Ephesians 5:19 says we make the melody in our hearts. Our hearts are engaged. And so you might say the heart is the instrument, if you will, in which the singing happens. It is, some people call it the heartstrings, as far as that is concerned. And so, and if you're sitting here with that mentality of singing, where it's like, okay, the words on the screen, everybody else is singing, I'm going to sing just because everybody else is singing, your heart's not involved in that. It's like what Billy said earlier, emotionally involved in singing. And that eliminates that idea of hypocrisy. And that's really what this point is about. If we're engaged, it destroys the hypocrisy. Because, if you look at, we're not going to take the time to read it, but in Matthew chapter 15, Jesus, condemned the Pharisees for hypocritical worship. And it's because their heart wasn't there. They were doing the acts. They were not necessarily doing anything wrong, but their heart wasn't involved in it. And that was the issue. And so, engaging our heart is important in the practice of singing. This next point's a little more practical. There's not a verse to go along with this, but I think this is just something worth mentioning. You can enhance your singing in worship by where you sit. And I would say to start where you sit. If you want to give more in your singing, sit with someone else who maybe enjoys singing out, regardless of if they can carry a tune in a bucket or not. There have been some people, I won't name their names, but there are people at McKenzie that they love singing, and you will see them at every single singing in the community. I'm not going to comment on their singing, but you get the picture. But they love singing. And so if I see them out at one of the other community singings or at McKenzie, I try to sit with them because they're so great at it. And they're also twin sisters, and so it's fun trying to remember who's who. So, no, there's 300 people that go to McKenzie. I've not. I'd like to go though. But based on where you sit and who you sit with or where you sit in the building, you can enhance the singing of the worship. And so, even if you walk in here and you go like, man, we could sing so much better. Well, maybe it starts with you. Maybe it sits with where you sit in the pews as far as that's concerned. And so that's not a major point, but it's something worth mentioning. Another thing, utilize opportunities to learn to sing. When we have singing nights, maybe we should take some time to learn a new song or maybe learn an old song that we just never sung before. It'll be a new to us song. Take those opportunities to learn how to sing and to understand the songs that we sing, and capitalize on that. And then also, I think, expand the sphere, not the fear, the sphere of your singing. So, in other words, don't limit it to just here at Dover. If there's other singings in the community, attend them. If you have family devotional time at home, I'm sure the elders won't mind if you take a songbook home and sing a couple of songs with your devotional time. But just expand your horizons, and you'd be surprised at how much the singing changes. In the gathered assembly, in the primary assembly where we're at. And so that's all of the lesson as far as singing. And we've got just a few minutes left. Are there any closing comments or questions about singing? Mm-hmm. Hey, God, like I said, God thinks you have a beautiful voice. He gave it to you. So, yeah. Any other comments? Okay. All right. So Psalm 95:1. Yes, but I'm a little weary of the interpretation of it. So in the book of Revelation, it mentions angels with harps. But being as Revelation is a very symbolic book, I don't know if that's symbolic or literal. That's been a debate, in the a cappella singing debate. Yeah. 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 And I agree with that, and also that just makes you think I think you were trying to say this, where it's like if you're focused on an instrument, you're not 100% focused on the singing. So if you're 100% engaged, that eliminates the need for instruments. Yeah. Yep. But singing is important, not just inside these four walls. And if you don't have family devotional time, I would encourage you to start family devotional time. That's a spiritual discipline in of itself. It's a good way to get your kids involved and engaged. But like I said, I don't think the elders would have a problem at all with you borrowing a psalm book and making use of them, because that's what they're here for. Yeah. 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 Well, the Hebrew writer calls it our sacrifice of praise. So, hitting on that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my granddad used to do it because my granddad loves bluegrass, and we sit around and you could hear him singing bluegrass all the time. And he is a really good song leader at church, and I think that has something to do with it. Not necessarily saying that he was worshiping God when he was singing his bluegrass, but I think that plays a role in it. But if nothing else, our topic next week will be the topic of fellowship, the spiritual discipline of fellowship. And so be looking forward to that next week. And thank you for all your comments. Thank you for all the reading. And y'all are free to roam about the cabin.